A one, a two, a one, two, three.
Well, good day, folks. It's Rob Beach from Beach's Motorcycle Adventures. And once again, we've got another installment of our podcast, the COVID I'm Sitting Here Not Touring Somewhere Wild in the World podcast. It has to be a little international. You know how that goes. So we're reaching out across the border that none of us can actually legally cross at the moment, to include none other than that icon of the Great White North, Mike Knott in Thunder Bay, Ontario. How do you do, Michael?
Things are going pretty good over here, Robbie. Things are pretty cool in Canada. Not literally, but that's not far off, I can tell you that. Tonight I poured myself a nice glass of Bitburger beer, mostly because it was on sale at the liquor store and I'm super busy, so that's what I bought. And I thought I could sit here and enjoy this lovely tasting beer as we speak to John Flores. Welcome aboard, John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks for coming out and joining us.
And I did listen to one of your podcasts, so I did bring a beverage with me also. I have a glass of Elijah Craig Kentucky bourbon. It's usually a wintertime drink for me, but for this podcast, I'll do it.
All right. We're honored. We're honored. I'm just sitting here drinking a Molson Canadian, which would make Mike's toes curl.
Yeah, I thought I recognized that can. No, so John, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? Looking at some of your info on your webpage, and that seems like you have a pretty interesting background.
Yeah, I actually have an advertising and marketing background. I don't know how that got me into motorcycles. Well, actually, I do, because I would work in an advertising agency and I would do some business writing, and I got compliments on my business writing. John, that was a nice proposal you wrote. That was a nice thing you did. And I was like, I took it as a compliment, but I was like, I don't want that on my gravestone. Here lies John Flores. He wrote good business proposals.
Man, he could write a proposal.
Yeah. So I was like, I got to do something with this. And I loved motorcycles, and I loved photography, and I enjoyed the challenge of writing. So I was like, hey, maybe I could become a motorcycle journalist.
And so that was something that was running parallel to the advertising side of things at the same time?
Yeah, it became my side gig. I made it a New Year's resolution one year to get published in a local motorcycle publication. So I did all my homework. I studied all the available publications, and I chose Backroads out of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Brian and Shira. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked them for their submission guidelines. They told me how many words it had to be. I submitted a story about going to the IMS motorcycle show at the Jacob Javits Center. And the story was about how, it's such a long winter and everyone's just jonesing to ride their motorcycles, waiting for spring. So they all go to the motorcycle show and sit on the bikes and make vroom vroom sounds and just wait for the spring to come. So I submitted it to them at Backroads. They published it, and I got a check for $50, which was like gold. And I ended up going to the local dealership and opening up the magazine and seeing my name in print. I was like, this is pretty cool. I want to do more of this.
I know a guy who made the cover of that magazine. They say it's one of the finer magazines out there.
Well, you've been involved with advertising since the internet started, since the first 0 and 1 went across the telephone line on a 9600 baud modem or something like that, I think.
Pretty much. I actually, my first job out of college was helping an advertising agency put Macs on everyone's desk. So I was the guy responsible for installing the Mac LC or the Mac Plus or the Mac Pro and teaching the designers how to use all the programs and all that stuff. So I was deep into the technology, and then got into the marketing aspect of it in the 90s, right during like the dot-com boom and all of that stuff. It was interesting times for sure.
So you've seen a lot of change there within the advertising world. And then how did you end up involved with the BMW Riders Association?
It's interesting because my work, I'm a digital guy, right? It's all about online. But for my motorcycle stuff, it's been mostly print. It was Backroads to start, and then I got a gig writing for Roadrunner magazine. I made it a resolution to get published nationally. I did my homework, found out their submission guidelines, flew out to Las Vegas on my own dime, and rented 2 motorcycles and did a couple of trips, submitted to them, and they published it. It was pretty awesome. And I was looking at the email the other day, and this was like 2004, 2005, and they were like, we want to publish your story. Can you send us a CD-ROM of your photographs? And it was like, wow, that was so long ago. That was the way to send stuff back then.
Yeah.
So I've had a great career with Roadrunner. I've been writing for them for over a dozen years now, and how that got me to the BMW Riders Association was that when they were looking for a new editor-in-chief of their magazine on the level, there was a member on the board that had seen my work in Roadrunner magazine, and also I had some stories published in the MOA's Owner's News. So,
were you a BMW rider at that point?
I was, it's funny because people ask me what kind of bikes I ride. I have bikes in the garage, but most of the time I'm riding press bikes, right? So my bikes always get neglected in most years. So I'm like a press bike rider, I guess you could say. I right in the backyard right now in the driveway, I have the new R18, the BMW R18. I just swapped a 2020 Goldwing for that. So typically during the year, I always have press bikes in that I use all the time. So to answer your question, was I a BMW rider? No. But I've ridden a lot of BMWs on my trips and in my stories, and it's a really, really awesome brand to be involved with. And I met with the club, talked to the board. It seemed like a really good fit for me in terms of expanding my writing. Again, I'm a writer, so they were asking me to be an editor, and it was really, really, I had never really been an editor before. But I took the job because I thought it would be a neat thing to try, and I've really enjoyed working with the board and working with the members, and I've really enjoyed helping other people tell their stories. That's the one thing I really didn't realize starting this job that I would really, really enjoy. I like writing my own stories still, but when someone has a neat idea, and it just needs a little bit of polish, just needs a little bit of finish to it, and I can help them hone that, and we end up with a story that looks and reads really well. That gives me a lot of personal satisfaction.
Yep, I understand that, and it also gives you a different perspective that of the story. You know, one of the things that I've always found fascinating about looking at photos that people take on tour with us is how attracted to other people's photos I am in comparison to the photography that I shoot. And it's not necessarily that the stuff is technically better. It's simply the viewpoint, the perspective that whoever is taking that shot has that's different than mine. Their focus or their attention is somewhere else in the frame. And I always find that fascinating. And it's the same thing with reading other people's stories on trips and motorcycles and all sorts of stuff is, okay, that was important to you. I didn't even notice that. I was paying attention to this aspect of it or that aspect of it. That is pretty interesting. How much direction as far as the editorial content or what to include comes from the board and from the club members versus your original ideas? I mean, is that something that's driven by the community, or are you putting it out there and then seeing what the response is?
It's a little bit of B, I would say. I mean, it's funny because when I took this challenge and I took this job, we know where print magazines are going. Right? Yeah. Every month we see another magazine either on the ropes or going to 4 times a year or going completely digital. And again, going back to my digital background as a digital marketer, I know the power of digital. So my first thoughts were, we're published 6 times a year. We're not gonna beat anyone to the news punch, right? We can't play that game. We can't try to we can't be breaking news in a 6 times a year publication, right? But I also know from my marketing background that the majority of content that's viewed on the internet is viewed on a phone, right? So most people are viewing photos or reading stories on a 5-inch screen, 6-inch screen, maybe 7-inch screen. So I took from that knowledge, I said, okay, we've got to make this magazine different. My challenge for On the Level is, I said, okay, I took a look at where the word count was. I said, we got to cut the word count and make the photos bigger, right? Because a nice photo on a 6-inch phone is not going to compete with holding a 2-page spread of a photo in your hands. Right. I was like, every issue, we've got to have a wow. You've got to turn the page and go, and the reader's got to turn the page, the members got to turn the page and see a beautiful 2-page photo and go, wow, that's cool. And that's simply an experience you cannot create on a phone. Right. So that was one of the things. And then the other insight I had was like, I mean, I've been a motorcycle magazine subscriber my whole adult life. I was subscribing to motorcycle magazines before I owned a motorcycle. I was just dreaming about them. But and the same thing with cars. I was a car guy too. But the one thing I noticed and I didn't want to repeat was, after your first year or second year of subscribing to a magazine, you get the rhythm of that magazine. Oh, it's time for the 400cc super sport Comparo. Oh, it's time for the big tour Comparo. Oh, it's time for this. Oh, it's time for that. And I was like, I didn't want to recreate that rhythm. And my thinking was, in the same way that I wanted every issue to have a wow moment where people would open up and go, that's really cool. I also wanted people to open up the mailbox and go, I wonder what's in this issue. I wonder what they've done now, right? So we have our regular columnists. We have Tamala Rich and Neil Bailey and Travis Wyman, who races BMWs, and they're great, and they're always trying new things in terms of what they're doing. I have my own column, but everything else is kind of like, let's see what we get. Let's see how we can get people to open up the mailbox and go, I wonder what's in this issue. So this current issue, the one that you're in, Mike, right?
Well, funny you should mention that.
The one that you're in, it's heavy on words, actually. We were getting, for this issue, we had long stories, 2,000 plus words. But this next issue, I'll preview it for you now. This next issue is going to be more pictures, right? So again, I just want each issue to be a little special, a little bit interesting for members and other folks to read.
Well, with you saying that, talking about just how the industry is changing, made me start to wonder how much is that changing the job of, say, a motor journalist? Do you need to be a better photographer than a writer? Because if the pictures are becoming, like you said, almost like the front and center thing, people's attention spans are not getting longer. Almost like, do you need to be a photographer first and a writer second?
Well, that's a good question, because it's like I'm a little bit of both, actually. But I know I think that's pretty unusual. Some people are either better writers than photographers. Some people are better photographers than writers. I think maybe to add on top of that idea, I think it is the short attention span. So what we have been doing until this most recent issue is getting shorter and shorter stories, going from 1,000-word submissions to cutting those 1,000-word submissions down to 700-800 words. We have this great series called First Journeys. The idea is we want members to tell stories of their first overnight motorcycle trip, right? And we make it so it's like 300 words. That's all you need. And part of the philosophy is, if you ask someone who isn't a professional writer, if you ask them to write 1,800 words, they might struggle with that. Mm-hmm. But if you ask them to write 300, it seems, oh, I could do this. And B, they end up if they write a lot, they end up having to edit their own work, which ends up making it better. The more time you look at it, and the more time you massage, the more time you cut, the better the result's going to be. And so
eliminate the fluff kind of thing, because they're adding words just to stretch it.
Yeah, exactly. So we had this, I mean, and like you were saying, Rob, we ended up with some of these unbelievably touching stories. We had this one member submit a story about how his first trip was a trip with his wife, and they rode down to Memphis, and they saw Graceland, and they had a wonderful time. And he says, and like the way he closes it is just heart-wrenching. He goes, "My wife passed away several years ago, but I still hold these memories in my heart," or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, like, hey, that's just so feeling and so human and so emotional. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't have to be a professional writer to either express those feelings or to feel those feelings in return. And I was like, yeah, this is what we're going at. And part of it is like, as with all motorcycling, we're getting older, the membership's getting older. And part of the thinking was, how do I connect the older generation of riders with the new generation coming in? Right. And so I was asking these members, these older members, to talk about their youth, right? To talk about the innocence of their youth, and talk about the mistakes they made on their first trips, talk about how they overpacked and how they dropped the bike and all these other things. And like, this new generation could totally read that and go, yeah, I know exactly what that feels like, because I'm there now.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. Interesting. I have been a BMW rider since way back when all the BMWs were exactly the same, except for displacement, and most of the parts fit on every single model. BMW as a motorcycle brand has come so far, and I imagine that's got to present you with some really interesting challenges, because through the years, I have certainly noticed that there are people who were absolutely adamant airheads. There is no other BMW except an airhead. And then there were the people that had the K bikes and this, that, and the other thing. And it was very typical, it seemed to me, for people to want to put a wall up around their little camp and say that this is where BMW ends. And now it's fascinating to look at the product line and realize that we've got an absolute world-class cutting-edge sport bike on one end, the 1800 Cruiser, which you're going to tell us a little more about later, I hope, on the other end, and in between quite a variety of different models and displacements, etc. And I'm curious as to how you juggle all of that with the airheads are the end of it, K-bikes are the end of it, GSs are the end of it. I would never get anywhere near a GT. Who needs 6 cylinders?
That's a great question. First of all, I have to give a shout out to our Facebook Clubhouse, which is managed by Jessie Ratterman. She does a great job of keeping the trolls out. The trolls who have those kind of discussions ad infinitum, right?
Yeah.
Ad infinitum.
Yeah.
And so she does a great job of that. And I will say the magazine, I mean, we do the bike reviews, and we do the GS stories, we do the travel stories and so forth. But maybe because it's my beginnings and my roots with Roadrunner, right? Roadrunner has always said it's not about the bike, it's about the trip, right? It's about the journey. And so I think I've kind of taken that to heart, and the fact that I've taken all these trips and all these different bikes, I lost count. I've probably ridden close to 100 press bikes by now, right? And I have my favorites, but the story is always about the trip, the things I see and the people I meet. I think I'm trying to elicit those kind of stories from the members and contributors as well. I mean, if you make a great point about BMW though, Rob, and I've spent 500 miles on this R18, and I've been thinking about how to process not only the bike itself, but like the fact that they came out with this huge cruiser, right? This 1800cc cruiser. And one of the thoughts that's been sticking in my mind, and I thought to myself, and it's not fully formed yet, but the idea that like in 1980, all the major motorcycle brands were associated with a specific engine format.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Hondas were fours, Harleys were V twins.
Fours, yeah.
Right? Triumphs were triples. Maybe not then. Not until not John Bloor.
More, yeah.
But most of the manufacturers had a engine format that they specialized in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Fast forward to 2020, Ducati's still primarily V twins. Harley Davidson is primarily V twins. Triumph is primarily triples. The Japanese are still associated with inline fours primarily, although twins are and stuff are making a thing. Yeah. But I think BMW, more than any other brand, has been able to break out of the single engine configuration mode in terms of what their product line is, and in terms of what they're known for. Like you're right, the S1000RR is 10. I mean, that blew the doors off everyone. No one expected that. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating because I was a sport bike guy in the early 2000s, and like I was riding Japanese sport bikes and loved them and everything. And I always looked at the BMW efforts of that era. You know, they were trying to make this big the Boxer work. And it was, I mean, I was younger back then, so it didn't appeal to me, but I was like, it's a nice try. But like when you're a sport bike guy, you're worried about weight and you're worried about horsepower. The moment you don't meet those two criteria, you're not even in the discussion.
Yeah.
But like, and then that double R comes out, and I'm like, holy cow! I can't believe they did that. So I'm kind of I'm still forming my thoughts about the R18, but I think this R18 may be BMW's most important bike since the double R.
So with that kind of in mind, I was thinking, a question for both of you: is there something different about BMW as a brand? You know, Harley has their persona kind of thing. There's something about Harley, and we can probably pin it down to a few different things. Does BMW have something like that compared to just being a fan of Honda or Kawasaki or whatever brand it is you like? Do you think BMW has a certain something that makes it, it's its own thing?
Yes, back in the old days, particularly. Today in modern times, no. That's what makes it really interesting. And that's kind of where the question came from. Going back 25 years ago, a BMW was a very specific type of bike. It's a bike that you get on and ride the entire length of the continent. It's a bike that you're never going to have problems with. It's a bike that's going to be dependable. It's going to be comfortable, that you can customize however you want to. And they're all kind of the same, depending on the customizations, but they were really similar. And now we've got such a variety of bikes, and BMW isn't simply copying things from a marketing standpoint. They're doing things their own way. I mean, when they came up with a big touring bike with the 1600 GT, they didn't come up with a 4-cylinder. They came up with an inline 6. Who does that? I mean, who makes an inline 6? It's quite an incredible machine. It's big. It's not my style, but it certainly is an effective competition for full dress Harleys, for the Gold Wings, et cetera, but it's done in a very different way. So now you've got a situation where there isn't any single, in my opinion, this is BMW, other than maybe the take that they're putting on it, which is we are simply the most technologically advanced company in the motorcycle industry, trying to push new things forward with advanced ABS, with better traction control, better electronics, et cetera. That's the one thing that seems to be high on their agenda. But the motorcycle lineup is so incredibly diverse that, and if you look at it and across the board, there are saddlebags on almost all of them. So these are bikes that are actually still intended to be used and ridden some distance, and that people are supposed to get on and go do something with, not simply hang out. With the exception of the 1000RR, which goes around in little circles really, 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 really fast.
I don't know. It's almost in a circle. You've maybe talked yourself into, there is a persona to it. It's changed. But what do you think, John?
I mean, you hit upon a bunch of good points there, Rob. I think, again, the Harley riders have their persona. I think the I think there's an aspect to the BMW rider that's still there's a seriousness to the pursuit, whether it's adventure riding or whether it's sport bike riding. It's a luxury brand, right? So people aspire to it. I hear it all the time. We're like, I interviewed someone and they said, well, I did this, I did that. I finally was doing well, and it was time to get a European bike. So when people think of European bikes like BMWs, it's like, I've arrived kind of thing. It's a reward for having achieved a personal goal or whatever. But it is amazing. They have thumpers. The only thing they're missing is a triple and a 5-cylinder, and no one has a 5-cylinder.
No one's doing that anymore. Personally, I when I think of BMW, I just think maybe their niche or their personality is just functionality. Kind of like you were saying, Rob, there's bags on pretty much every bike they have. And so you can use this bike, and that's why I really like it. I'm a very practical person in that I don't mind. I used to have a Corvette. Love my Corvette. My Corvette, I could drive across country. We had room for our luggage. You could take the car to a track day and compete with just about anybody. They're very functional cars. And that's what I think about with my GS or most of the BMWs is I can get on this motorcycle and I can go down a dirt road. I can go down interstate. I can do pretty much anything with it. I can chase some sport bikes down a mountain pass. This thing just plain simply works. It's got some lumps and bumps in some weird places, and they're probably fairly functional. They finally got rid of the extra turn signal switch or two, which is great. And but they work. And when I think of them, I guess that's what I think of. Maybe is their kind of personality. This bike maybe isn't the most this or best that, and sometimes they are. But they will work. You can drive this to work, or you can drive it across the country, or you can drive it across the desert kind of thing. It's going to work for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, in contrast with Harley Davidson, they are a lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
Right. BMW takes it a little bit differently. I was at the virtual press intro for the R18, and Gerard Stocker, I believe his name was, one of the design guys. He was talking about the design process. He was talking about the design process for the R9T, right? The R9T, you could argue, was BMW Motorrad's second kind of retro-inspired bike, or, the first one being the R1200C, and then the R9T. So he recalls discussions happening at BMW where they were proposing this boxer engined, naked standard bike. There was feedback within BMW that was basically saying, well, we already have the R1200R. From a specification standpoint, they had that already. But there's a group within BMW now that's maybe pulling some of this inspiration from the popularity of retro bikes and the passion that people have for Harley Davidson. They're saying there's an emotional aspect too that we need to touch on. And so they pitched the R9T saying, this is a different bike than the 1200R. 1200R is a very capable and technically highly functional bike. But the R9T, it attempts to stir something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's more the stylish kind of thing. Made me think what you were saying is that, if you look at Ferrari's a race company that sells cars. Harley Davidson's a t-shirt company that sells bikes. And
Mike, be nice.
Nice.
But if you look at 30 or 40% of their income is generated by accessories. A lot of it being t-shirts. Nothing against that. Good for them. I wish BMW and a few other companies would do the same thing. You go into a BMW motorcycle shop and want to buy a t-shirt, and there'd be 3 on the rack. I don't understand why that is. You'd think they'd want you wearing their stuff, but Harley Davidson's totally got the licensing thing, whereas it seems like most other companies have not. I don't know why that's so difficult for them, but.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I'm working on my story for the R18, and I'm thinking about the evolution from the R1200C to the R9T to the R18. The way I'm looking at it now, the R1200C was their attempt at making a cruiser, but 100% the BMW way.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and that's the way to do it. Do it in your own style, which has been in the previous years what the Japanese have been kind of accused of or whatever, copying Harley Davidson. Whereas you couldn't say that about the BMW bike. They're not copying anybody; they're doing their own thing.
Yeah, but it didn't. I mean, I think they wanted that bike to be big. They had it in the James Bond movie, for crying out loud, right? They really wanted a hit there, and I don't think it quite hit their sales goals.
No, no, it didn't at all in Europe or over here.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, I know people who have them and love them. They're highly functional, but it doesn't stir. I don't think it stirs the soul in the way that a Sportster does, for example. Right?
No. I've often said, to me, you buy a car with your head, you buy a motorcycle with your heart. And probably not a lot of people, like you said, stirred by a 1200 LC.
And like that telelever, as functional as it is, you know, you can't get a Harley guy to look at that telelever and go, I understand the engineering behind it and I appreciate it. They're like, you're not going to.
You're talking about a market where the motorcycle is almost designed not to handle, and every accessory they bolt on makes it worse. But they love it. So, which whatever, good for them. so you can't enter logic and performance into these conversations because that's not their concern.
Yeah, and on this R18, it's like I've done 500 miles on it so far, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, which of my criticisms are criticisms of the bike, and which are criticisms of the category? You know, I'm dragging the foot pegs. That's not really the bike's fault. That's the category. That's because you've defined the category to be long and low and all of those things. So the foot pegs drag and on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And if you had been coming from another V-twin cruiser, you would be used to it and it wouldn't be a surprise and you wouldn't be leaning over that far in the first place.
Yeah.
And there is the interesting dilemma of coming from anything else and saying, this is how I ride. There was a fascinating article I read a few years ago, and I don't remember the publication, but I certainly remember the idea, which was I just went out and took a press ride on XYZ sport bike, and they handed it to me for 2 weeks. And so I brought it back home and went down my very favorite road on this thing. Oh, it was a Cruiser magazine. And so, but the author had been given a sport bike at another press release, and he took this thing home and wrote it down his favorite road. And the point of the article was, you just ruined my favorite road, because I can do this effortlessly on this motorcycle 100% faster than I've ever ridden it in the past on my cruisers. And I used to have a lot of fun and visceral reaction to going down this particular road on those motorcycles. And now I realize how completely non-impressive it is. So you've ruined it for me. And, you know, it's an interesting perspective, though, because if you have only ever ridden a motorcycle that only leans over 18 degrees, and that's the maximum, then your take on that R18 would be very different than if you had been riding around on something that's got relatively unlimited ground clearance for the last 10 years.
Yeah. As a friend of mine would say, I'd rather ride a slow bike that felt fast as opposed to a fast bike that felt slow. Because one gets you in way more trouble.
But there's a whole group of motorcyclists out there that aren't interested in pushing their own performance envelopes. Yeah, they just want to go. They just want to go for a ride. I did not understand Harley Davidsons until I did a story for Roadrunner magazine. I went out to Kansas for a week eating barbecue, and they gave me a heritage. I know, tough life. They gave me a heritage Softail Classic to ride. Sometime during the trip, I was literally on a road that was straight for 30 miles, and it was 98 degrees. And I thought to myself, whether I could have been on a Ducati trying to drill these 30 miles as quickly as possible, it would have been terrible, right? I might have gotten there 5 minutes faster, but it would have been straight for 30 miles and my back would have been killing me. Yeah. Or I could just lean back on the Heritage Softail and toot along at 60 miles an hour, slow enough that I could look around and see the countryside. And I was like, oh, that's what this bike is about. It's not about lean angles. It's about just like cruising around. And I kind of get it. It's not the kind of riding I typically do, but I kind of understand why people do it.
No, for sure.
That's the roads and the speed limits and everything else in America are very, very much in tune with that sort of riding.
Yeah. I've ridden more than a few cruisers, and it's exactly that. Like you said, it's not the riding I'm interested in, but I totally get it that you need to pound out some miles, or just you like the scenery on these roads, and you're not interested in challenging yourself at every corner. You want to get on the bike, feel some air, take it easy. And those are great bikes for doing it. Yeah. Right on. Good for you. It's not what I want, but it doesn't matter what I want. It's what you want. You own the bike.
Yeah, exactly. So my first day on the R18, I was just like trying to hooligan it, right? I was just getting on it the whole time. I was seeing how fast I can go on a highway. I was like getting into the tuck as much as I could. And then I rode down to DC with it, doing that a lot of the way. And I was like, this is actually terrible. And this is not what this bike was built for. So I've got to, and this is what most people won't be using the bike for anyway. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in order to give this thing a fair review, I've got to try to use it the way it was meant to be used. Mm-hmm. So I've been riding it all chilled out ever since, which is a shame because that motor is a peach. It really does like to rev, and it's got power all throughout the rev band, and it just feels and sounds great when you do it. But the rest of the bike isn't built for that.
And many, many, many riders, as you mentioned, are not at all interested in that. So I hope that they hit a home run with it. That would be really cool to see a bunch of our 18s out on the road.
Yeah. They talked about, they used the word family repeatedly at the press intro. Just like the R9T, I can imagine this R18 first edition spawning a whole bunch of different variants and variations throughout the line. So it'll be interesting.
And I would imagine that that's a motorcycle that was built very much with a focus on the North American market.
Yeah. They call that an acquisition bike, meaning they hope that most of the people that buy the bikes aren't current BMW owners.
Yeah, mm-hmm. For sure.
That they're coming from other brands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the flesh, it's a beautiful, beautiful bike. It really does have a presence to it. And even when riding it, I still look down and look at those giant fins on those giant heads and go, holy cow, this thing is huge.
Well, you've got plans, I'm sure, to head off to some Harley gathering place or meet or something and pull in on your R18 to see how it's received. I would hope so. As an investigative journalist, that certainly should be high on your list of things to do.
You're 100% right, but we're in the season of COVID. The
bikers are still going out. They're still riding.
Well, there were two things I was hoping to do. One, there was a poker run that I've been to and I've photographed in the past, and it's typically a couple hundred bikes. 99% of them Harleys. I was hoping to go to the poker run. The poker run's been canceled, and this weekend is supposed to be the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, right? Which is more cafe racer style and stuff like that. But that's been canceled. It's all like solo rides now. So I am gonna have to find a bike night somewhere and wear a mask and see what people think. But everyone that has seen it and knows motorcycles are like, wow, that's nice.
Interesting. I've not seen one live, but I admit that when I saw the first photos of it, I visually was far more attracted to it than I was to the 1200C. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like we've got this motor and we're going to try to turn it into a cruiser. It looks a little bit more like we're going to try to build a really cool cruiser.
And they really have it. It really does have a street presence to it. It's a beautiful, beautiful bike. And so hopefully, like I was in DC and I rode by some DC cops who were on the side of the road with their Harleys, and I saw their necks crane. as I went fast. But the interesting thing, and other people have mentioned it, and I've noticed it riding, the motor is actually pretty docile when you're at idle. And when you're at very partial throttle openings, it really doesn't make a lot of noise out of the box that way. It's only when you really, really get on it does it start to growl at you. So I would imagine there's going to be a group of people that like that exhaust note even at idle. They want to annoy their neighbors at idle, and so they're gonna there'll be aftermarket pipes for sure.
Interesting.
Speaking of that, it's just funny. It's like, how much of the sound of a cruiser do you think affects the sales? It's like, how much of that annoy your neighbor or attract the attention? People should check out South Park for that kind of thing.
I know that episode.
I love that. That's a great one. How much do you think that affects the sales? Is it just that hey, look at me factor? I
think it affects it a lot. I bet you the aftermarket pipes for the BMW are going to have a lot of sound to them. I believe they've actually designed the motor to shake at idle. So when you're on that thing at a traffic light, or when you start that thing, you've got to hold on tight because that thing's like, because you got 900cc pistons each battling, right? So yeah. I think they really spent time thinking about that visceral experience, right? It's not really just about making the most efficient cruiser. It's really about creating this visceral experience that people can really appreciate. And so when you start that thing up and when you're at idle, it's like, it's really substantial. It's pretty cool.
Well, because even look at say the Triumph Rocket 3, how much of the sales are linked to just someone, maybe not linked is the right word, but someone buying it simply because it's the biggest motor. I'm buying this motorcycle because it's the 2.3, 2.2, I don't remember. But yeah, well, what's the biggest one you got? Yeah, I'll take that. So then I can tell people this is what I got. And I'll probably never use it because I've never ridden one, but I can't imagine they handle it terribly well. But they get up and go very well.
It sounds a funny thing because in 2016, was it now? 2016, I rode cross country on a Zero electric motorcycle.
Oh yeah.
I like good sounding exhaust and good sounding intakes. I've always said that, like Kawasaki's, their intake growl is like nice. It's like it's like angry when you rev a Kawasaki. Anywhere from their little Versa 650 to their big cruisers, they have that going for them. But I was on this Zero and I didn't miss the sound at all, to be honest with you.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because even when you're riding, like if you're at a racetrack, you wonder how much that affects someone riding, and that the sound of the motorcycle when you're downshifting on the gear, the sound of the motorcycle, you would know I'm in roughly the RPM that I want to be going to the turn. I know what the bike is doing, but if it's giving you, it's a bit of feedback. It's a form of feedback. But if it's not giving you that, how does that affect you?
Well, it's interesting because I had that Zero DSR in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it was an amazingly capable tool on a twisty road because there's only one gear. It's only one speed.
Yeah.
And the noise, you can see the noise as a distraction almost. So you can go into a turn and not have to worry about your revs, not to worry about downshifting, just worry about your braking point and your turn-in point. And then once you see the exit path open up, just roll that thing on and the torque's there. You're never in the wrong part of the power band.
Yeah, so the noise you're getting out of the exhaust is telling you you're in the right RPM of the right gear, but in that electric motorcycle, that's not a concern.
Yeah, you're always in the right gear. Yeah. You're always in the heart of the torque curve kind of thing. So it's like, I remember testing my first Zero in Manhattan and like being at a traffic light, and normally like there's so much noise in the city, but it was a relatively quiet street. So I was at a traffic light on the Zero and there was a tree with birds chirping nearby. I was like, really? And then I would get on it at the light and it had that whine sound.
Yeah.
It sounded like something from Star Wars. It sounded like the future. It was very, very cool.
That sounded like the future. You might be right on that. You really might be right. Interesting. Well, you mentioned that the riders are getting older. The baby boomers certainly are, and aging out in some cases, and the markets are changing. What do you see on the horizon that's going to get new riders involved? What do you think is going to draw the young people into motorcycling, if anything?
If any, I was just talking about this the other day, the idea that all these activities and hobbies that the boomers brought into the world, water skiing, snow skiing, all these other cycling even, they've all seen a decline just from a demographic decline, just because the subsequent generations aren't.
Even I know around here, golf courses, so the hockey programs, because of course Canada, everybody, a lot of us play hockey. Those programs are also a major decline.
Yeah, baseball, major decline here in the U.S. To be honest with you, I don't know what you can do, but I think this COVID-19 is, again, this boom in bike sales is interesting. Like, everyone's riding a bike now, right? You can't buy a bicycle. I volunteered at a place that would rehab old bikes and sell and give the profits to a boys and girls club, and like they ran out of bikes because everyone was on a bike. So who knows, when we come out of this, are we going to generate a new cycling boom? And if we do, can we get some of those cyclists to eventually want to be under power, to eventually want to throttle? And that throttle could start with an e-bike, right? Mm-hmm. That throttle could be, or a pedal assisted e-bike. I know some motorcyclists that have those pedal assisted e-bikes or those throttle e-bikes, and they love them, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that might be the pathway for this next generation, to have them to come in through bikes and come in through e-bikes and eventually graduate to a larger a motorcycle, whether it be gas or electric. That's what I'm hoping.
Suppose the motorcycling, the way we know it now, hasn't been around that long, and that is this just a normal cycle, and that it peaks, everybody's into it, and then it wanes, and they're on to whatever it is they're on to, and that'll change 15, 20, 30, hopefully not 50 years from now. But it starts picking up again, and all it takes is something like the vid hitting everybody, and hey, this is actually pretty cool. Let's start doing this again, and other sports possibly too. Of course, well, we can tell you 50 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we also have to, before this hit, and I was thinking about this question, and it was like the thing that's changed, not just demographically from 40 years ago, from the 70s, the heyday of the first motorcycle boom. The thing that's changed is our built environment. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the roads are so much more crowded these days. Our country's population is probably 100 million more people. The suburbs have exploded out into exurbs, and so you could be in the middle of nowhere, approaching a small town or a small city, and get stuck in gridlock and get stuck in traffic. Not only that, but we've become safer. We've tried to become safer drivers. And part of that has been just like belting our kids into minivans, right? So the idea, like, we're talking about a generation of kids that have grown up in car seats, in minivans, stuck in traffic, going to soccer practice. There's no romance in that motion. There's no romance in that movement. When we were younger, 2 wheels and 4 wheels were freedom, right? We would get away from our parents. We would get away and hang out with our friends. They're doing that at 12 with their phones already.
Well, we were talking about that the other day. In high school, if you had a car, man, you were something, because nobody had a car in high school. Whereas now the parking lots for the students is twice the size for the teachers, because every second student has their own car.
Yeah. But like the kids escaped from their parents the moment they got their phone and got on Snapchat and got on TikTok. Because they're doing things that their parents don't know what they're doing. There was a great study I read years ago as I was studying marketing, was that they studied kids who hung out for an evening with a variety of friends. There were friends that they were hanging out with in person, and that there were also friends that they were texting with and doing stuff on social media with. At the end of the evening, these kids didn't distinguish between real hanging out with friends for real and hanging out with friends virtually. It was the same thing to them. It was fascinating. So, I mean, video games are cool and all that, but there is still something special about being on two wheels and counter steering into a turn.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That you cannot yet recreate. So if we could just get that feel into kids and get that bug into kids. I know there are groups out there. There's one group led by Robert Pandya. He's doing some great stuff at the IMS shows where they have the demo bikes and they have the zero bikes, and people who have never ridden before can try out the e-bikes and try out the zeros just to get their feet wet, kind of thing. It's those kind of programs I think we need to just get people to get people to really feel that joy of leaning into a turn.
Well, that, and I don't know about, all I know is the area where I live is insurance. And for someone like myself, I can get insurance for motorcycles fairly cheap. My KTM, $400 for a year. It's street legal. My BMW, I pay $1,000, I think. It's about $1,000. But for many young people, for a motorcycle, it can be $3,000 or $4,000 for a motorcycle. A motorcycle worth $6,000, especially the sport bikes, and it's really killed the market. And I don't know what you do about that. I would almost think that has to be up to the manufacturers to put pressure on governments. And I remember years ago, I think it was Yamaha had a program. They could get you insurance. They were selling insurance through themselves somehow, however they made it. But that seems to be a big impediment for a lot of people, especially for motorcycles. A car, especially here, you can argue, yes, I need my car because I need to get to wherever I need to be. But a motorcycle, no, it's a luxury item. And I know people have gotten out of it because I'm not giving them $1,500 a year for this motorcycle. I'm only riding a bit. To hell with them.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about like economics, I mean, it's hard. You know, you're talking about a generation that's graduating with all this college debt, right? And how are they going to afford a motorcycle within the context of all of that? So,
whereas when the motorcycles got a really popular at the time, it's like, yeah, you could buy a bike cheap, but you could also insure it cheap. Because you can still buy a cheap motorcycle, but if they want $3,000 a year for insurance,
well, that's unique to you guys up in the Great White North and your situation in Canada. Because if you're only insuring a motorcycle for liability in New York, it's not expensive. I don't think that I'm spending $300 for 6 motorcycles that are in the garage.
Yeah, but that's
all insured.
What if you were 16 or 17?
Liability only, it's the same. It's when you start to get into the collision that it turns into literally the cost of the motorcycle, because the insurance company looks at it and said, 17-year-old kid, 600 sport bike, 3 months. 3 months and we'll be buying that bike. You know, and unfortunately the statistics run right in line with that. So that's the scenario there.
Cheap bikes. With us, it's because it's kind of a weird situation here in Canada. We have socialized medical care, right? But not when it comes to your vehicle. It's a little bit weird in that if I fall off my deck and go to the hospital, it's through my normal medical care. But if I get in a car accident, it goes through my car insurance. It gets the way of recouping costs. So they do the same thing with the motorcycles. Your insurance a little bit more because they're paying for your medical care through your motorcycle insurance or vehicle, whatever vehicle you're in. And so that's part of your costs or through that. Okay. Which is a deal compared to you guys. But,
I mean, if I was getting a summer's worth of medical insurance for $2,000 and my bike insurance on top of it, sign me up, man. Sign me up.
What happens if you ride your bike off the deck? Is that what happens then?
Yeah, I don't know. I might have to try that.
So I've been lucky enough to meet some of the next generation of riders, and it gives me hope. There's a guy in Brooklyn that has a zine, like this low quality magazine that he publishes, and he's got a riding crew out in Brooklyn. A couple years ago, I went to a bike night in Manhattan, and it was all younger. It was all younger folk on all sorts of bikes. You know, there was this guy that had come from Nebraska on a Honda, the 700 NX. He was basically riding to all the places in the song the Johnny Cash song, "I've Been Everywhere."
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
So he was just riding everywhere. There was a couple where he was on a KLR and she was on a little Yamaha 250 and stuff like that. So they're out there. Some of them do catch the bug. I think we just got to expose more people to in the era of COVID. We've got to expose more people to the bug.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the important part, I suppose, when you really come right back around to it all, is the thing that you're actually doing with the magazine, and that is putting the experiences out there and putting the human pluses to it. Mm-hmm. Because that's something that with motorcycles, if you've not been there, you can't relate to. You can't relate to it until you've had that magic moment, whether it's a magic moment with somebody that you just met because you're on a bike, the magic moment of someplace you are that you wouldn't have been otherwise, how you feel at that point. You know, that's where the hook is set, and hey, I've got to do this again and again and again and again. So, gee, look at that. And in addition to all of your digital marketing and everything else, you're there in the forefront of indirectly pushing motorcycles to the next generation. Good on you, John.
I am trying. We all got to do our part, right? I mean, it's funny because you go to the IMS show and you go to the BMW booth, and it's very interesting that BMW chooses to put at the very front of the booth. You got to look at the bikes they put there. They typically put the R9Ts and the 310s. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right, because they're trying to get that next generation of rider. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's so funny because when you look around the booth, those two bikes, they have 20 and 30 somethings by them. The GSs are in the four corner. They have 50 somethings by them, and the other bikes have older riders by them too. The mm-hmm. demographic breakdown is right there when you look at it. It's really fascinating.
So speaking of that IMS, John, so what do you think of motorcycle shows and or car shows? They're very similar. Or is that a dying thing, or is it underutilized? I think it's underutilized myself, but
that's hard because from the marketing standpoint, a marketing department looks at how much money those things cost versus how many people they touch, mm-hmm. and what kind of brand impact they have, versus other things.
But that's that would be my argument. But versus what? Because what is working better than that? Do you have a target audience entering your building? Obviously, they're interested, as opposed to a TV ad or a newspaper ad that people may or may not even pay any bloody attention to, especially the PVRs and short attention spans. You mm-hmm. have people coming to you, so they obviously give at least a half a shit.
Yeah.
And you're going to ignore them, or you're not going to support this. So sorry, I cut you off, but so is this not a good venue?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why magazines are struggling right now is that marketers have figured out that they no longer need the magazines to reach their consumers. When you look at Red Bull, for example, I don't think they spend a dime on advertising.
No.
They spend all their money. They spend all their money on organizing these events and creating these awesome videos.
Which is indirectly advertising because
But they're not paying magazines. They're not paying televisions. They're not paying anyone.
But they're paying marketers to have their own channel, and I mean that's not free, right?
But you're right. But they've skipped the gatekeepers, though.
Yeah.
They've skipped the magazines. They've skipped the television studios and television companies, and they're going straight to the consumer with their message. Yeah. You know, so they're starting to realize, you know what, I don't need to spend all this money to pay for full page ads in all these print magazines, which now have an older demographic and I want the younger generation, I'm going to create I'm going to have Danny McCaskill, bicycle trials rider, do this awesome 20-minute video about him riding in Scotland and put that on YouTube, and it's going to blow up, kind of thing.
Of course, they're the poster child there of how to do it.
Yeah.
And there's 1,000 who are probably failing at that terribly.
Yeah, but more and more companies are trying their hand at that. They're going directly to the consumer. It's no longer Ogilvy on advertising. It's no longer, here's a man in a Hathaway shirt kind of thing, and here are the 5 qualities of the Hathaway shirt that make you want to buy it. It's like, here's an inspiring story. Oh, it just happens to be sponsored by Audi.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because it's been changed. The industry since I've been in has changed dramatically. And so I've seen how the changes in advertising are affecting the changes in publishing. I've got a unique perspective on that because I have a foot in either circle.
Mm-hmm. But it just still seems like a little bit underutilized, and they're not replacing it. I don't know. I guess that's my perspective.
I think in a way you're right. I think it would be neat to see them rethink what a IMS show is, possibly. Is it more of a festival, right? Is it more of a I mean, the way I would do it if I was running it, I would tell I would say, okay, hire a bunch of 20-year-olds to try to get other 20-year-olds to come. Because there's no way a 40 or a 50 something is going to have their finger on the pulse of what's going to drive that next generation in.
And I think not for the next generation. That's true. That's true.
I don't know what kind of costs are involved, but for the people organizing this, but I hear the costs involved. If you want to get involved, if you want to advertise, are lots of cash, and maybe that has to be readjusted. And I don't know if they can, if it just costs so much money to rent the venues, and these are fixed costs, and they're really not making much money off it. I have no idea if profits are made or not, but maybe everybody has to take a second look. Look, you've got this huge convention center. Either you're going to rent it to us for X amount of dollars, or we can't keep coming here because we can't justify spending this much money. And maybe everybody has to readjust a bit here. Like if I want John Flores to open up a booth, or Beach's Motorcycles to open up a booth here, they can't give you X amount of dollars. Everyone's got to take a hit here, or your convention center can sit empty.
The IMS show in New York gets smaller and smaller every year because every year people who used to get 10 by 10 booths or 10 by 20 booths are making the decision. They're looking at the hard dollars and saying we didn't get our money's worth out of it.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's really, really tough unless you're actually selling gun holsters right there, or leather bikinis or something. And you can compare your pocket when you walk out of there versus when you came in there. It's really a tough call.
I was at a Americade a couple of years ago. I was for Roadrunner, and right across the way was that the guys that will clean your eyeglasses for you and then sell you the spray. They're at every show, and they must have had 4 or 5 people just working it, and I was like, how do they make the money work at the end of the day? But I guess they have it figured out somehow.
Yep, they do. So, oh man. But anyway, that's all advertising in the big picture. And here we are thinking about BMW and the BMW RA and the wonderful group that is there and that club. What do you miss the most under COVID of changes within the RA this year?
I miss the rally. I mean, to be honest with you, it's really cool to meet the members and to just hang out. I mean, last year's rally was great. We had a neat theme, the Woodstock theme. So we had 60s music playing all around the place and stuff like that. And people really got into it. And I miss meeting the members, because like I'm doing this, I get judged by them at the end of the day, right? Am I representing them well? Am I telling their story? Am I making them proud of on the level and stuff like that? And so I like hearing from them and getting their feedback. So I definitely miss that. I mean, this season of COVID, I haven't been able to get as many press bikes. I know it's a very sad story for me.
Well, just keep riding the ones you've got. Just ride them more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They all become long-termers.
Yeah. BMW Motorrad USA's offices are here in New Jersey, and they've been working remotely since probably March, because they were near the epicenter, just outside of New York, where everything was hit. So they've been shut down the whole time. So that's been bad. But like kind of what we were talking about earlier, Rob, it's how do we stay connected with the members when there are no rallies? Like, how do we stay all together? And we have a Facebook clubhouse, which is very active, and we have a lot of good contributions and fun there. But nothing beats being in person and going to the rallies and meeting other folk and riding with other folk.
Right, exactly. Well, that's what the sport's all about from the point of view of a lot of folk, myself included. That is the downside to all of this, but eventually, hopefully, it will be behind us, and we're going to look back at where we were and look ahead at the new world that's going to be sitting there for us. And, Mike, you're talking about the changes in the IMS show, and this could happen, that could happen, should happen. I guarantee you that 18 months from now, you're going to see a lot of things that don't look the same as they did 18 months ago. There are a lot of changes that are about to pop up, and who knows what they are, but just the simple idea that big gatherings are something that people would be potentially shying away from just in general, because there's this vestige of big gatherings are not places I really want to be, sitting in their mind from 18 months ago. And we don't have any idea how that's going to fall out at this point. So things are going to change. They're definitely going to change. And I think that rather than sit back and worry about all this, because none of the three of us, well, actually, Mike, you and I aren't going to make another nickel in our life or have any less stress if we have all of that information. John needs to know that, because that's his career and everything else. But we can just drink beer and ride motorcycles. We'll wave at you when we go by, John.
Nice, thanks, guys.
No, we have to ride motorcycles and drink beer. You said it the other way around.
Oh, yep. That's right.
Yeah.
Ride motorcycles to someplace good to drink beer and stay there.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Okay, lightning round. You know how it works. Radio or TV commercial?
TV.
Burger or pizza?
Pizza.
Digital or film?
Digital.
RT or RS?
RS.
GS or RT?
GS.
Biggest advertising pet peeve?
Please stand by.
Sphinx cat, yes or no? The hairless cat.
Oh, totally. Yeah, baby.
Have you watched Mad Men?
No.
MotoGP or World Superbike?
MotoGP.
Place you would like to travel to that you have not?
Africa or Nepal.
So, last question. What's your favorite motorcycle podcast?
Well, I've been listening to motorcycle podcasts since the 1920s, and I've got to tell you that my favorite is Beach's Motorcycles Adventures podcast.
Well, we appreciate that. That's super cool. This has been a blast. I really enjoyed this.
This has been great, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for joining us and giving us some insight into the world from both the BMW RA organization and digital advertising, et cetera, et cetera. It's always neat to hear that.
Yeah, very, very cool. Thanks for having me, guys. Really, really enjoyed it. So, can someone tell me what's going on?
No?
No.
That would
just the way I like it.
That would sort of indicate that we know what's going on.